Part 12. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 111. Chapter 111. No one is in the room. Liu Zhu shook his head helplessly, stretched out his hand to wipe the crumbs from the corner of her mouth and said, "Eat slowly." Zhang Wanan had no time to pay attention to him and just nodded vigorously. "You guys have a good time in class. I'll pick you up and take you to the hospital in the afternoon," Lin 11 said as she was approaching school. Liu Zhu nodded, but Zhang Wanan replied excitedly, "Okay. When mom is almost recovered and all indicators are back to normal, I'll take her to live with you, okay?" Lin 11 asked Zhang Wanan. "Really?" Zhang Wanan immediately opened her eyes and looked at Lin 11 expectantly. "Mom didn't lie to you, right?" Lin 11 asked. Zhang Wanan hurriedly shook his head and said, "No, no." But after Zhang Wanan lowered her head and thought for a while, she suddenly asked, "Where's Dad?" "Other children live with their parents. If Dad comes back, will we have to move out and live alone?" Lin 11 looked a little ugly when she asked her this question. She turned her head and looked out the window uncomfortably, pretending not to hear. Zhang Wanan refused to give up and turned around to ask Liu Zhu again. Liu Zhu was also speechless for a moment. Fortunately, the car stopped in front of the school not long after, and Zhang Wanan also gave up on the answer to this question. When Zhang Wanan got out of the car and entered the school, Liu Zhu turned around and looked at Lin 11. "Mom, it's not a good idea to hide it from her all the time. She has mentioned Uncle Zhang more and more recently," Liu Zhu reminded. "I know it too, but we don't know how to tell her. She's still young. We're afraid she won't be able to bear the blow. You also saw how much he longs to see his father. If it is suddenly said that her father has, alas, she definitely can't bear it." Lin 11 covered her face and said helplessly. She now feels guilty whenever she sees Tang Yu and Zhang Wanan, especially when they mention Lao Zhang. "I saw a painting in her room yesterday. There were 6 people in total. There was a faceless man on it. I guess that was the father she dreamed of. What he wanted to see was a real and touchable appearance. Instead of just being in front of him. It's what you see in the photo," Liu Zhu said. Lin 11 nodded, but she had no choice because people cannot be resurrected after death. "I will slowly tell the truth to the mother and daughter," Lin 11 said. Liu Zhu nodded and said, "Don't put too much pressure on yourself, Mom." "No." Lin 11 reluctantly twitched the corner of his mouth and showed a smile. Originally, Lin 11 thought that Tang Yu would be less stressed when he woke up, but now the pressure did not decrease but seemed to increase. If the mother and daughter knew about it, collapse would definitely be inevitable. After all, no one would be able to bear the loss of the backbone of the family. After sending Liu Zhu off, Lin 11 asked the driver to drive the car directly to the hospital. Lin 11 walked into the ward and found that the room was empty, even the quilts were neatly folded. Lin 11 panicked and walked over to touch the temperature of the bed, which was already cold. It seems that Tang Yu has been gone for a long time, Lin 11 thought to himself. Lin 11 ran out to the nurse station and asked the nurse, "Have you seen Tang Yu?" "No, what's wrong, Sister?" Lin 11. "Is Sister Tang Yu missing?" a young nurse asked with a frown. Because Lin 11 has come to the hospital frequently in the past 6 years, and because she is approachable and has no airs, she has gotten along well with several young nurses. "There is no one in the room, haven't you seen it?" Lin 11 confirmed again. "No, otherwise, Sister 11, go to the small garden downstairs and have a look. Maybe Sister Tang Yu is exercising downstairs," another young nurse suggested. Lin 11 patted his head, nodded and ran away. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 112. Chapter 112. Where is the person I most want to see? Tang Yu hasn't gotten out of bed in 6 years. Maybe he is exercising at the moment, as the little nurse said. What normal person doesn't want to run around? No one wants to be in a wheelchair unless there is no other way. Lin 11 went downstairs, looked around, and decided to walk to the right. She followed the path and walked all the way, and sure enough, Tang Yu was walking there being supported by the caregiver. The moment she saw Tang Yu, Lin 11 took a deep breath and relaxed. She thought Tang Yu couldn't bear to leave after knowing the truth. But come to think of it, Tang Yu is not that kind of cruel person. Lin 11 walked over and shouted, "Ayu, you came down so early. I didn't even see you when I went up." "Ah, you're here?" "I woke up too excited and wanted to come out and breathe the fresh morning air." Lin 11 walked over and helped her from the caregiver's hands and asked, "How's it going?" Tang Yu looked at his legs, sighed, and said, "After all, I have been lying down for 6 years, and my legs always feel like rusty machinery. I have to slip away for a while." "Don't worry," Lin 11 comforted her. "Where are the children? Have they all gone to school?" "Gone, just sent away. Thank you for your hard work these past few years. Needless to say polite words, the main reason is that I like Anan very much. Why don't we book a baby wedding for their 2 children? Lin 11 raised an eyebrow and said. Women will probably be very excited when talking about this, such as these 2 people. Okay, we agreed before Anan was born. I thought you had forgotten about it after so many years. How could it be? I hope these 2 children are together. Xiaozhou once told me that he wanted to marry Anan. We even asked him to sign a guarantee for this. Lin 11 couldn't help laughing after saying this. Huh, did Xiaozhou really say that? Tang Yu probably never thought that with Lu Zizhu's character and aura of staying away from strangers, he would be unable to say such things. I told you, I'll let you see the guarantee letter another day. While walking, the 2 people were arranging the future of their 2 children and their own lives when they were old. It seemed that they were already old and the children had grown up in an instant. We are just thinking here, but what about the 2 children? Are you unwilling? Tang Yu finally thought of thinking about the children. When you are discharged from the hospital and see how the 2 children get along, you will know whether they have that intention. She has seen all their performances around her. Okay, you observe first. Okay. The 2 people agreed harmoniously on a beautiful marriage. The 2 of them were thirsty after talking and tired from walking, so they simply found a bench and sat down. Now that you've woken up, you finally have someone to talk to with me, Lin 11 said and patted Tang Yu's hand. Where are John and the others? Why aren't they accompanying you? You are busy, unlike me, a homeless person who runs around every day. However, they are very happy to hear that you are awake, but they are all out of town and will not be able to come back for a while. They will probably be back in a day or 2. Lin 11 said. Let them be busy, don't worry about me. Tang Yu smiled and shook his head helplessly. It turns out that she has been worried about so many people for so many years, but what about the person she has always wanted to see the most? Is it what she thought? Otherwise, why haven't you come yet? Tang Yu thought about it and turned his head and smiled bitterly, not daring to let Lin 11 find out. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 113. Chapter 113, Good Deskmates in China. Come to live with us when you are discharged from the hospital, Lin 11 said. Tang Yu was stunned for a while and opened his mouth but said nothing. When Lin 11 saw that she was silent, she smiled and said, I have already made an agreement with Anan. Let's talk about it then. I've been bothering you for so many years, Tang Yu said. You, oh, Lin 11 sighed helplessly as he spoke. She didn't want Tang Yu to always feel guilty. The 2 of them walked outside for a while, and gradually the sun came out. The temperature was not low on this day, and soon the sun became uncomfortable. So the two people returned to the ward. I was worried that Anan would be estranged from me, Tang Yu said with a wry smile just after entering the ward. How could it be? She often came to see you when she was little, and she would cry when she missed you. It made us feel bad to see her. Because Tang Yu missed Zhang Wanan's growth for so many years, he always felt uncomfortable. It happened that the two of them had nothing to do, so Lin 11 simply told her about Zhang Wanan's childhood. Tang Yu lowered his head and listened with great interest, and the smile on his face became brighter. The other side. Zhang Baihui came over when he was going to have lunch near the end of get out of class. How about I take you to eat something delicious later, Zhang Baihui asked Zhang Wanan. Huh, Zhang Wanan didn't hear clearly and looked at him with a frown. I'll take you to eat delicious food later, Zhang Baihui repeated again. Okay, the teacher is watching us, we'll talk later. Zhang Wanan glanced sideways at the podium and reminded. Zhang Baihui nodded and gestured okay to indicate that he understood. After class, students rush out of the door. Teachers often joke that they become so active only when they go to the restaurant to eat. If Zhang Wanan usually designated her as one of those people, but today there was no one in the classroom, she was still sitting there and tidying up the things on the table. Let's go, Zhang Baihui said. Zhang Wanan jumped up and said, okay. Can you add me? And I. Zhang Wanan and Zhang Baihui looked at the two people who had just woken up in surprise. Why are you still sleeping? Don't you usually go and take a seat at this time? Zhang Wanan asked doubtfully. She didn't even notice the two people over there just now. The two people rubbed their eyes and got up. He Chiu snorted angrily and said, as a good desk mate in China, I have to give some idiot a makeup lesson after school. You are the fool, Su Chiao patted He Chiu. You're not stupid. Why did your aunt ask me to give you extra lessons? It's a waste of my time, He Chiu said angrily, stroking the beaten back. My mother has nothing to do, I don't need to make up lessons, Su Chiao said and threw the book. Don't be angry, He Chiu hurriedly put away the books she had thrown. Su Chiao snorted coldly and stopped looking at him. Okay, let's go to dinner together, I'll treat you, Zhang Baihui said with a gentle smile. So the four of them went to the restaurant together. There are so many people, He Chiu couldn't help but look up to the sky and scream when he saw so many people. If it were normal, we would have been at the front of the queue, Su Chiao was a little discouraged. Okay, feel free to queue up, Zhang Wanan patted Su Chiao on the shoulder and comforted her. In fact, she was also very anxious and hungry. To make up for it, I'll buy you a big chicken drumstick for each of you, please, Zhang Baihui said proudly. From now on, we will be brothers with chicken legs, He Chiu, who was in front, stretched out his arm across the two people and patted Zhang Baihui's shoulder. Secular, Su Chiao complained in a low voice. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 114. Chapter 114 Chicken Leg Brothers. When did He Chiu start tutoring you? Zhang Wanan asked doubtfully. A week ago, my mother learned that he was good at studying and was my desk mate, so she asked him to give me extra lessons. What happened was that my mother knew his mother, and she agreed easily. Su Jiao's face drooped as he spoke, almost bursting into tears. Very good, I'll give you some extra, Zhang Wanan said with a smile. You also know that I am not good at studying. How can I learn well by just making up for it? Su Jiao rolled his eyes helplessly as he spoke. She doesn't like studying at all, she finds studying boring. Then tell Auntie quickly, as long as you convince Auntie, I won't have to give you tutoring. I don't want to waste time giving tutoring to you, a fool, every day. He Chiu, who was standing in front, couldn't help but say. He still has to spend his free time playing ball or running around to play. Who wants to tutor that idiot all the time? He is so stupid. He Chiu thought to himself. Just say it, Su Jiaojiao said angrily and changed places with Zhang Wanan. Zhang Wanan was suddenly pushed forward and looked confused. She is too difficult. When the queue reached 4 people, there was not much food left, and many plates were empty. Fortunately, there was still some meat that Zhang Wanan needed to eat every day. They all ordered a large chicken drumstick, and then mixed the meat and vegetables with a vegetarian dish, bought drinks, and ordered a rice dish. "It's going to cost you, brother, chicken legs," He Chiu said, putting his arm around Zhang Baihui's shoulders. "It's fine." "Huh? Why didn't you ask for chicken legs?" "Oh, did you spend all your money?" He Chiu said worriedly when he saw that there were no chicken drumsticks on his plate. Hearing the sound, Zhang Wanan and Su Jiaojiao looked towards Jiang Beihui and found that there were no chicken legs, but there was still one meat dish. "Alas! Since we are brothers with chicken legs, I will give you half of it soon," He Chiu said extremely proudly. Zhang Baihui smiled helplessly. "I don't like chicken legs, they are too greasy. I only eat them once a week." Upon hearing this, He Chiu unceremoniously picked up the chicken legs on his plate and started to chew on them. "Then I won't share it with you." Su Jiaojiao looked at his eating habits and rolled her eyes and complained, "Nothing to show for it. Don't eat the liney yuk yuk silani bus. You are promising and you have the ability, don't eat it." He Chiu stuffed his mouth and said inarticulately. Su Jiaojiao looked at him with disgust and thought to himself that he was really worthless. Even eating a chicken drumstick could have such an effect. Like delicacies from mountains and seas. The 4 of them sat at a table. He Chiu just gnawed at the chicken drumsticks. Not enough. After finishing his own, he even grabbed Su Jiaojiao's drumsticks from hers when she wasn't paying attention. If it weren't for the crowded restaurant, Su Jiaojiao would have chased him and beat him up, but she endured it because she was afraid that He Chiu would complain to her mother, and then her mother would say that she acted like a boy. It's so nagging. He Chiu only ate the chicken legs and did not eat the vegetables and rice on the plate. After eating, he went to grab Zhang Wanan's, but Zhang Baihui, who had quick eyes and quick hands, hit his hand with chopsticks. He Chiu touched his hands and looked confused. "Are we still chicken leg brothers? Why are you so protective of her?" "She is my desk mate," Zhang Baihui explained. "Then there's no need to be so protective," He Chiu said coquettishly and reached for the chicken legs again, but was blocked by Zhang Baihui. "She is still growing. If you don't have enough to eat, I can buy it for you," Zhang Baihui said. He Chiu rolled his eyes and lost interest. "How can I let you spend so much money? I won't eat it." End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 115. Chapter 115 Storm Inhalation. Zhang Baihui looked at Zhang Wanan with a gentle smile and said, "Eat." Zhang Wanan nodded, no longer restrained, and immediately began to inhale like a storm. "Eat slowly, no one is grabbing it from you, so don't ask for more if you don't have enough." Zhang Baihui thoughtfully took out a tissue and placed it next to her. "It's enough." That's enough," Zhang Wanan said inarticulately. "Then eat slowly." "Brother Baihui, don't you understand this? It's tasteless if you eat it slowly." As he said this, Su Jiaojiao also started to inhale like a storm. "You should try it too." He Chiu glanced at him. Zhang Baihui hesitated and smiled awkwardly. "Forget it." He Chiu shrugged, meaning it's up to you. After the 4 of them finished eating, Su Jiaojiao and He Chiu started fighting each other for some reason. They started to chase after each other while they were arguing. Zhang Wanan has adapted to their way of getting along with each other and says he is not surprised. "Let's go back to the classroom." Zhang Wanan shrugged and said helplessly. "Let me ask you to go buy something from the canteen," Zhang Baihui said, taking Zhang Wanan's wrist and running towards the supermarket. Zhang Wanan was suddenly taken away without any preparation. She staggered and fiddled with her short legs in a desperate attempt to keep up with him. "Slow down," Zhang Wanan shouted helplessly from behind, unable to keep up. Zhang Baihui stopped and looked back at her and asked innocently, "What's wrong?" Zhang Wanan shook off his hand and glanced at her sore and red wrist, feeling a little aggrieved. Loses who has never treated her like this before. Loses who always considers her. He knows that she walks slowly, so he will deliberately slow down his pace. He will protect her and will not let her run too fast, Zhang Wanan thought aggrievedly. "What's wrong with you?" Zhang Baihui asked again. "It's okay, let's go." Zhang Wanan pretended to be natural and secretly hid her hands behind her back. But her poor acting skills betrayed her. Zhang Baihui's eyes dimmed and he nodded, "Let's go." The two of them didn't speak all the way, just walking one behind the other, but Zhang Wanan would jump up and down from time to time. Zhang Baihui just had a soft smile on his lips. The two of them came to the canteen. Since Jiang Baihui paid the bill, Zhang Wanan didn't dare to be presumptuous. She just took a bag of potato chips. If Loses who usually paid, she would have hugged a lot. "Why don't you buy more?" Zhang Baihui asked doubtfully when paying. "That's enough. I'm quite full from lunch today," Zhang Wanan said very reservedly, trying not to let him see anything unusual. Zhang Baihui nodded. After paying the money, the two of them still returned to the classroom one after another. There was still some time before class, so the four of them got together again. Zhang Baihui and Zhang Wanan were still very stable, completely different from the other two who were noisy. Compared to them, it's like two different worlds. Time flies by quickly, and soon it's time for school to be over. I don't know why, but Zhang Wanan missed Loses who very much today, more than usual, and she couldn't attend class smoothly. She rushed out as soon as school was over, feeling like a sprinter. At that moment she became the most noticed student in the school, just because she ran so fast. But she was disappointed when she ran out. Loses who didn't come because school had just ended. Zhang Wanan was a little disappointed. The driver was already waiting outside the door. "Anan, get in the car. My wife is not here. We will go directly to the hospital in a while." Zhang Wanan felt very happy thinking about seeing her two mothers again soon. She nodded obediently and said, "Then let's go find brothers as who." The driver carried her into the car and said okay. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 116. Chapter 116. The older you get, the more complicated it becomes. After receiving Loses who, Zhang Wanan was very enthusiastic and happy and hugged him. Loses who touched the top of her hair and asked, "Isn't Mom here?" "No, we can go to the hospital to see Mom soon," Zhang Wanan said excitedly, and at the end she added mysteriously, "Two moms." Loses who looked at the silly girl and smiled helplessly. Just as they were about to close the car door and leave, Gu Jinchu saw them with keen eyes, and then Avril came out. "Long time no see." Little An and Gu Jinchu put one leg on the car and kicked the ground with the other and said coquettishly, "Yes, brother Jinchu, it seems we just met a few days ago." Zhang Wan smiled harmlessly. Gu Jinchu rolled his eyes and looked a little embarrassed. He stood up, waved his hand and said boringly, "Let's go, let's make a date on the weekend." Zhang Wanan also waved to him, and then greeted Avril warmly, "Sister Avril." She screamed very loudly. Avril came over and smiled slightly, "Xiaonan, do you miss your sister?" "Think about it," Zhang Wanan replied obediently. "How about my sister taking you to play that weekend?" Avril asked, touching her little face. Zhang Wanan clasped his hands and pouted, looking a little unhappy. "Why are you all saying we'll see you on the weekend? Why can we only see you on the weekend?" Loses who felt funny when he saw that she was unhappy, but he still reached out and pinched her mouth where she could hang the oil bottle and coaxed, "Because my brothers and sisters are very busy and have a lot of homework." I also have homework, but I didn't say see you on the weekend, she still pouted. Loses who sighed helplessly, your homework is simple and few. We have many and some difficult problems. We also have to preview new lessons, so there are many tasks to complete. Jongwanan thought for a while, stretched out her little hand and waved to Avril, then sister, let's meet on the weekend, and you go study. After Avril left, their car started, but Jongwanan still looked a little angry. Loses who reached out and poked her face and asked, what's wrong, baby? Jongwanan crossed her hands and looked at Loses who seriously and said, Mr. Wangzi and I are no longer from the same world, and the prince is no longer that prince. Huh, Loses who, no matter how highly intelligent he was confused when faced with her incoherent sentence. Huh, Jongwanan snorted and turned away from looking at him. What's wrong? Loses who continued to ask. I want to go to the same school as my brother, Jongwanan said after a long time, her voice trembling and her eyes turning red. Why? The elementary school you went to is the same one I went to. Loses who didn't seem to understand what she meant. I mean I want to be in the same school with you now, Jongwanan explained again. Loses who finally understood this time. He shook his head with a smile and coaxed gently, baby, you are still young and cannot be in the same school as your brother. And the older it gets, the more complex it becomes. Then we are not from the same world, Jongwanan still pouted, a little unreasonable. But she is a child and doesn't understand anything, let alone what it means to make trouble unreasonably. We are people of the same world. We live on the same earth, the same land, even live under the same roof, and eat the same food. We have many things in common, so how could we not be people of the same world? Loses who listed the same. Jongwanan lowered his head and poked each other with his hands, pouting and not knowing what to say. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 117. Chapter 117. The mail is so cold. But you are all so busy, so I can only say see you on the weekend. After a long time, Jongwanan raised her head and looked at Loses who and said very seriously. Loses who was stunned for a moment, thinking that the little girl was affected by what they just said. Can I stay with you more from now on? Loses who asked softly. In fact, the little girl was very coaxable and did not continue to make trouble. She nodded and said with a sobbing voice, then you keep your word. Of course, a prince would never lie to a princess, Loses who said seriously. Jongwanan's nose was red. She grabbed Loses who's hand and played with it. After a while, she felt a little nervous and began to admit to Loses who what happened today. Don't be angry if I tell you something. She took the vaccination first. Loses who was unprepared and nodded, you said it? I had dinner with Zhang Baihui at noon, Jongwanan said calmly. Yeah, Loses who replied calmly. Aren't you angry that we are eating together? Jongwanan felt a little unbelievable. What's wrong with classmates having a meal together? Don't be angry, Loses who replied calmly. He bought me snacks, but I didn't dare to ask for more. Seeing that he was not angry, Jongwanan continued to boldly take out all the snacks. Why don't you dare to ask for more? Because you didn't buy it? If you did, I would buy a bunch of them, Jongwanan said with a smile. Loses who also suddenly laughed. He felt that this girl was really stupid. Others were reluctant to take too much when buying her, but he was willing to buy her. Although Loses who said he was not angry and acted very generously, he still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart, but he was tolerating it. Because he thinks there is nothing wrong with making a few friends, but if the so-called friends have other thoughts, he will be the first to disagree. When he went to the hospital, Loses who held the bouncing little girl, and the nurse sisters still enthusiastically gave them sweets when they saw them. Loses who didn't eat it when he was a child, and now that he's grown up and sensible, he's even less likely to eat it. He still gave the candy to Jongwanan as before. It was obviously a normal behavior, but for some reason it attracted strange screams from the nurses. Xiao Jojo, if my sister was still young, she would risk her life to marry you. A young nurse held her face in her hands and looked at Lu Zizhu with fascination. Lu Zizhu's face remained calm, but in his heart he felt that this woman's words were really unpleasant, that she was actually interested in him, and that she might even ruin his anan. He held Zhang Wanan's hand and felt that he could not stay for another minute. Let's go. Zhang Wanan didn't forget to say goodbye to the little nurses before leaving with a lollipop in her mouth. Lu Zizhu, on the other hand, was aloof and left without even looking back. The mail is so cold, the little nurse still held her face in a nymphomaniacal manner. You're still a nymphomaniac, and you don't even spare the children. Aren't you busy? It's time to work. The head nurse came out from nowhere, and yelled a few times sternly. Sure enough, the few people who were chattering just now became quiet in an instant. When Lu Zizhu and Zhang Wanan entered the ward, they didn't know what Tang Yu and Lin 11 were facing out the window, and they didn't seem to notice their arrival at all. Two moms, here I come, Zhang Wanan shouted playfully. Lin 11 and Tang Yu looked back at them together. Because they were standing in front of the window against the light, Lu Zizhu suddenly had a bad premonition at that moment. He felt that Tang Yu was so far away from them, but he was also standing with her. Lin 11 who was with him didn't give him this feeling. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 118. Chapter 118 Mother-in-law. Xiaozhou, what's wrong with you? Lin 11 asked Lu Zizhu, who was in a daze. Lu Zizhu came back to his senses and looked at Lin 11 and then at Tang Yu. They were already sitting on the bed, and Zhang Wanan was looking up at him worriedly. Lu Zizhu touched Zhang Wanan's head to indicate that he was fine, and then politely greeted Lin 11 and Tang Yu, Auntie, Mom, good afternoon. What's wrong? Did you not sleep well recently? Why are you so dazed? Lin 11 asked worriedly. No, Lu Zizhu quickly denied. That's good. If anything happens, you must tell your parents in time, Lin 11 instructed. Lu Zizhu nodded and said nothing. Seeing that he was fine, Zhang Wanan climbed onto the hospital bed. Mom, she called out obediently. Tang Yu hugged Zhang Wanan into his arms and gently tapped her forehead. My little Anan is finally out of school. Zhang Wanan nuzzled in her arms like a kitten, then grabbed Tang Yu's hand with her little hand and drew something unknown on her palm with her fingers. Love Mom, Mom, right, Tang Yu read every word Zhang Wanan wrote intermittently. Zhang Wanan nodded vigorously, and then gave Tang Yu a thumbs up. Tang Yu couldn't help but smile when he saw her cute little appearance. But she felt more guilty. Zhang Wanan saw that Tang Yu was happy, and then crawled towards Lin 11 and took Lin 11's hand. I have two mothers, and I can't make either mother unhappy, she pouted while writing in Lin 11's palm. Lin 11 and Tang Yu looked at each other and smiled knowingly when they heard what she said. What if the two mothers are happy but the brother is unhappy? Lin 11 teased her. Zhang Wanan stared at her big eyes in confusion, looking at Lin 11 and then at Tang Yu, not knowing what to do. Lu Zizhu also put on airs and sat on the chair solemnly without saying a word. Zhang Wanan rolled her eyes, walked towards Lu Zizhu with a mysterious smile and said, Xiao Jojo, come here. She followed the example of the nurse sister calling Lu Zizhu. Lu Zizhu was a little helpless. Unexpectedly, he was still a bad teacher and started calling him by his name. Lu Zizhu moved forward and said, how? As a result, before Lu Zizhu could ask the question, Zhang Wanan, who was lying on the edge of the bed, quickly put her mouth towards him and kissed him. Zhang Wanan blushed and quickly sat down, pretending that nothing happened, then clapped her hands and said, I'm all happy. Lu Zizhu looked at her red face, and then touched the cheek that had just been kissed and also blushed. He smiled helplessly. The little girl had used this trick many times, but he still fell easily for it, and more than once. Only he knew whether he did it on purpose or if he really had a short memory. The gossip that belongs to women is burning. Lin 11 and Tang Yu clapped their hands excitedly and called each other in tacit understanding, mother-in-law. Zhang Wanan was shocked by their shouts and blushed even more. She threw the quilt over her head and said in a muffled voice, "Stop shouting." Lin 11 and Tang Yu tried hard to restrain the joy in their hearts, looked at each other, coughed twice and began to whisper. Lu Zizhu felt a little funny when he saw Zhang Wanan's embarrassed look, but he was too embarrassed to laugh. After a long time, Zhang Wanan slowly revealed her eyes, and then her entire face. She looked around and found that no one noticed that she had exposed her head. She gently patted her and took a deep breath. "Are you up? Do your homework. We will have dinner in the hospital tonight and go back later," Lu Zizhu said without raising his head while looking at the book. Zhang Wanan suddenly felt like he couldn't see anyone anymore. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 119. Chapter 119, Be kind to her. Zhang Wanan didn't say anything for a long time. Lu Zizhu raised his eyes, chuckled lightly and walked towards Zhang Wanan. "Get up and do your homework." He reached out and pulled the quilt covering her head. Zhang Wanan, who had his quilt taken off, covered his face with his little hands again and said in a muffled voice, "I won't write. If you don't do your homework, the teacher will spank you," Lu Zizhu said and spanked her. Zhang Wanan sat up suddenly, her little face turned red from the stuffiness. She looked at Lu Zizhu angrily, but she didn't say a word after looking at it for a long time. She jumped out of bed, took her school bag, and poured out the contents. Lu Zizhu smiled helplessly when he saw her losing her temper. Lu Zizhu walked to where he was just sitting and sat down to continue reading. From time to time he would look up at Zhang Wanan. Zhang Wanan noticed that he was looking at her and muttered, "What are you looking at?" Lu Zizhu only heard a little sound, but he already guessed that Zhang Wanan must be talking about him, so he just smiled helplessly. Lin 11 and Tang Yu saw that they were both doing homework, and they did not dare to speak loudly, so they helped each other out of the ward. "Let's go see if there's anything delicious." "You guys should do your homework," Lin 11 said before leaving. "Okay." Zhang Wanan raised her head and replied obediently with a smile. The two of them have been quiet, reading and doing homework, so the ward seemed quiet. Until Zhang Wanan's long sigh broke the silence. "What's wrong?" Lu Zizhu asked without raising his head. Zhang Wanan sighed again, "Xiao Jojo, I don't know how to write this composition." "No big or small," Lu Zizhu scolded helplessly, then he closed the book on the table and walked over, holding the table with one hand and supporting Zhang Wanan's side with the other and asked, "What's the topic?" Zhang Wanan smiled playfully, pointed at the title of the essay and said, "Look at Xiao Jojo." "No big or small," Lu Zizhu scolded again, but he was already happy in his heart. "Xiao Jojo, well, it seems to sound pretty good, but it only sounds good when it comes out of her mouth." He lowered his head and looked at the title of the essay. "There are so many people in our family and they are so outstanding, why don't you just write down one?" Lu Zizhu said. "Are you praising our family?" Zhang Wanan smiled. Lu Zizhu also laughed, "Do you think so?" "Yes," Zhang Wanan grinned brightly. "Then write, I believe you can write well. After all, our family members are all excellent." Lu Zizhu praised his family again. Zhang Wanan was so amused that he covered her mouth and laughed, "Xiao Jojo, when did you become so low-key?" Lu Zizhu raised his eyebrows slightly, spread his hands and said calmly, "Is this the truth, or does it mean that you are not outstanding in our family?" Zhang Wanan was speechless for a while. She drove Lu Zizhu away and then immersed herself in writing the essay. "Who are you writing about?" Lu Zizhu asked after Zhang Wanan finished his homework and put it away. Zhang Wanan smiled with crooked eyes and said mysteriously, "A very outstanding person." Luzes, who understood, nodded, and said, "Then it seems that the outstanding person is me." Jiangwanan rolled his eyes speechlessly and said, "Xiao Jojo is becoming more and more shameless." But she admitted that she was indeed writing about him. Because in her eyes, Luzes who has many, many advantages. Although he has a bit of a bad temper, he is very kind to her. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 120. Chapter 120. My son has grown up. Not long after finishing their homework, Lin 11 and Tang Yu walked in with the food they bought. Jiangwanan looked at the food. Although she had eaten it a few times, she knew it was not good in color and not tasty, but she was already very hungry and didn't care about it. "Can we eat?" Jiangwanan asked eagerly, grabbing Lin 11 and Tang Yu's hands. Lin 11 and Tang Yu looked at her pitiful look. Although they felt very pitiful, they still couldn't help but want to laugh. The two of them reached out to touch her head at the same time, and replied in unison, "Of course." At this moment, Luzes, who deeply felt that he was an outsider and that he was autistic. After dinner, the three of them said goodbye to Tang Yu and returned home hand in hand. Jiangwanan seemed to be in a bad mood after eating, so she lay on Luzes whose lap and fell asleep in the car. Luzes who lowered his head and admired her appearance quietly. He felt that this little girl must have been a little fairy in her previous life. She was so beautiful. He felt that all the girls in their school could not compare to Jiangwanan. He felt that he was just the one. She should be so deeply immersed that she can't extricate herself. He felt it was too much, but he never thought that beauty was in the eye of the beholder. Jiangwanan was so fascinated by Luzes whose appreciation that she didn't notice it at all, but Lin 11 looked on with an aunt's smile on her face. She felt this scene was really loving. When he got home, Luzes who didn't even bother to shake Jiangwanan awake. He gently pulled out his already numb legs and got down to the ground, gritting his teeth and stamping his feet. Lin 11 also got out of the car and opened the door on the other side. Just as she was about to hug Jiangwanan, a hand stretched out to block her. Lin 11 looked along the arm suspiciously and found Luzes who looking at her with a frown on his face and a constipated expression on his face. What's wrong?" Lin 11 looked at him in confusion and was about to reach out to help him. Luzes who stretched out his hand to indicate that he didn't need to support him. "It's just that my leg is numb," he said it calmly. Then Luzes who stamped his feet a few more times, then bent down and picked up Jiangwanan, who was sleeping peacefully. Lin 11 exclaimed, "Her son has grown up. Awesome, awesome." Luzes who heard Lin 11's exclamation and just looked back at her as if she was mentally retarded. Lin 11 only felt as if she was despised by her own son. Jiangwanan, who was lying in Luzes whose arms, seemed to feel more comfortable when she was not in the car. She rubbed her head dishonestly and put her ear right against Luzes whose heart. Luzes whose steps suddenly stopped, and he felt as if his heartbeat was speeding up. He took a deep breath and walked upstairs quickly. Although he was still holding Jiangwanan, Lin 11 still didn't catch up with him. Lin 11 thought to herself, "I don't know why this kid went crazy. He suddenly ran so fast. What should I do if he fell to her precious daughter?" Luzes who had safely sent Jiangwanan back to her room, took off her shoes and covered her with a quilt. Just as he was about to turn off the lights and leave with Lin 11, he heard Jiangwanan humming a few times as if he was feeling very uncomfortable. "It's about crying. He must have dreamed about something bad in his dream," Luzes who thought to himself. He came back again, squatted in front of Jiangwanan's bed, patted her back gently, and said in a gentle voice, "Don't be afraid, brother is here." Lin 11 felt that she might be useless here. Knowing that she was redundant, she closed the door and walked out of the room with a wink. Luzes who stayed in front of the bed. When nothing else happened to Jiangwanan, he left a bedside lamp on and gently closed the door and left. Lu Lin went on a business trip again for work, and the three of them were at home for a long time, until Tang Yu's indicators and other indicators were all right and he moved in together. I may not stay here for a long time. This is what Tang Yu said to Lin 11 when he was packing things in the ward. End of this chapter.